Simple Gestures, written by Frostflower.
Do you like it?
Princess Twilight Sparkle looked up from her book, the sounds of the coffee shop filtering into the background and allowing her ears to focus on her mare friend's soft voice. What a strange description, she might have thought, especially when Rarity's voice often was the most vibrant sound in the room. It always demanded attention, to be heard and processed, and to take the room by storm, much like Rarity did most everything. But now, curiously, Rarity's expression matched her voice. A cup of tea sat before her, faint traces of steam wafting out, swirls of milk and water and lavender leaves mixed together by a spoon enveloped in magic. The unicorn's eyes were half-lidded, but not as though she were tired or anything of the sort, but more like the thoughts in her head were swirling about, demanding to be present, demanding her concentration.
I do,
Twilight said brightly, as one should do when gifted with a surprise present. And a book, no less. Books were her favorite things, after all. They took her to wonderful places, taught her new things, and never let her down. Positive knowledge and experiences could be gleaned from even the worst of literature.
I'd never seen this edition of Constellation Oracle's experimental thermodynamic magic theorems,
she continued, glancing back at the book and skimming through the pages.
How did you even find it? I have my ways,
Rarity replied non-committally until Twilight raised an eyebrow. She let out an amused smile and elaborated.
A client in Manhattan collects antiques and agreed to sell it to me.
Twilight bit her lip, her joy fading. The book currently before her was a rare find indeed, and surely any antique collector knew its expensive worth.
How much did it cost?
Rarity raised an eyebrow.
Dearest, such a question is quite telling of your knowledge of etiquette.
Twilight's cheeks turned hot.
That's not what... I didn't... I just... I know, my darling, but let me concern myself with my expenditures,
she said, and so did Twilight know that the book she'd been given had not been cheap to buy.
I know you love having absolutely every edition of every book you love, so I simply had to get it for you. Oracle's books aren't very easy to find either, especially after they were banned for so long.
She licked her lips and an excited smile pushed its way onto her lips.
Did I ever tell you why Oracle's books were banned?
Rarity's lips curved, and she rested an elbow on the table, later pressing her chin against her hoof.
I don't think you have,
she said, curiosity interweaved in her voice and gesture, lean in ever so slightly.
Pray tell.
Twilight giggled, sitting up straight in her chair. Now that was a story she loved. It was fascinating and completely changed the way one should view magic theorems.
Okay, so according to Princess Celestia...
Word after word, Twilight explained, the entire world fading to a blur around her. It felt like she spoke for hours, and she honestly could have done as much considering how excited the topic made her. Her ramble only stopped when the jarring sound of a metallic tray and ceramic came smashing onto the floor, followed by the admittedly delicious smell of split pastries and the apologies of a deeply embarrassed waiter. Her ears flattened against her head, and she glanced towards the waiter with some amount of irritation. However, when she looked back to Rarity, the unicorn seemed everything but disturbed by the interruption. Her eyes were still set on Twilight, and the soft smile remained. It happened sometimes, those small moments where it seemed as though nothing in the world existed to Rarity but Twilight, and it was always in those moments that Twilight would suddenly become aware of the rapid beating of her heart. Her eyes dropped to Rarity's teacup, and she noticed that steam seemed to have stopped rising from it. offering her an idea on how long she'd been talking.
"Oh, your tea is cold,"
she exclaimed, a slight blush tainting her cheeks. Rarity blinked, her eyes flickering toward her unsipped beverage.
"Is it? I hadn't realized,"
she replied, and her smile grew when her eyes rose back to meet Twilight's.
"Such an enthralling story makes one forget to drink one's tea."
Twilight grinned sheepishly.
"Isn't it? I couldn't believe Princess Celestia when she told me about it."
She licked her lips and closed the book, suddenly reminded of the fact that she had not brought a present for Rarity. Of course, it was impossible for her to have brought one, especially when Rarity's was a surprise one, and Twilight could hardly predict the future, except that one time with Time Turner's spell, which actually was a day she didn't want to remember. But anyway,
"Why don't you let me pay for our meal today then, at least?"
she suggested, hoping to somehow repay the gesture, only for Rarity to insistently shake her head.
"Nonsense. I won't have you pay for a present." "But this is an expensive book, Rarity. In a collector's edition, too. I know it's a present, but..."
Rarity hummed, and though she remained in her position, chin resting on her hoof, her smile vanished and her voice growing serious.
"Twilight, may I be very honest with you?"
"Of course," Twilight replied, momentarily thrown off by the change in tone. She sat up straight, her brow furrowing slightly. Had she upset Rarity now?
"I gave this to you for entirely selfish reasons. Everything about this was done to benefit myself."
Twilight blinked. "It was? How so?" Rarity tilted her head slightly, her eyes fluttering.
"Because seeing you happy is what I most love in this world,"
she said, and oh, how her smile turned mischievous at the heavy blush now decorating Twilight's cheek.
"Now,"
she continued, licking her lips and leaning in, ears perked up.
"what happened at the Oracle jailed Starswell?"